Hello, this is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about this clip from MSNBC of them talking about not white nationalists, but Christian nationalists, which has become such a boogie man kind of term to strike fear into people. And I really find that they don't want to tick off Christians too bad, so they want to do this distinction. But the truth is that they don't like Christians that live by their convictions if their convictions will somehow if you're Christian, your conviction should conflict with a lot of things that these leftists and stuff are trying to do. And if you wanted to have that influence your vote or something, then they're not going to like you, and they're going to want you to be Christian nationalists. It's fine if you go to like a woke black church and you espouse your sort of ideology and it's political and you get those people engaged and activating and stuff, etc. But people who are like looking at their Bible and are like, there's a particular worldviews that I believe that, I'm going to stand up for, then you're just a bad person. But I think this is really highlighted in this clip here that I want to show you guys today from MSNBC. And it's just so dumb. It's just so unbelievably dumb. But I also want to talk about this clip from Allie Stucky. There's a trend on TikTok and other places of like trad wives. And so I guess she upset some people because she just kind of noted that just because you're a trad wife, it doesn't necessarily make you a, kind of have like a biblical sort of view as a wife. And some people weren't into her opinion, and I thought that she kind of was correct. So I wanted to talk about that and other things as well. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation to blacktnews.com/donate, because it does cost to stream and run my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I very much appreciate it. For watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. For watching on YouTube, you guys can send super chats. And if you're watching back later, you guys can send super thanks and still the stars on Facebook. You guys can check out different merch at the store, like this I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For t-shirt. And I got other t-shirts and mugs and things as well you guys can check out at the store. Please check out some of my books that I've written. I have my book, Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. That's a faith book, a nonfiction faith book that you guys can find on the website. If you go to the merchandise page, you'll be able to find where you can get all my books. You guys can just search my name on Amazon, but I have 17 that are all published. 2 are nonfiction, and the rest are fiction, ranging from like children's chapter books, historical fiction, contemporary fantasy, etc. I just write whatever the heck I want to. And the other nonfiction book is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. That one is also available on Barnes & Noble, but you guys can get all my stuff on Amazon. So I don't have a meme for you guys today to start off with something humorous, but I'm going to tell you something that I do find kind of funny and is making me kind of chuckle. I do think it's kind of funny that as we are on the tail end of Black History Month here, that there are so many people right now discussing and so passionate and even livid about this Alabama Supreme Court ruling. And so many people are like, how dare they say these living, distinct human organisms are not property. It's so funny to me. It's like, how dare they? It's like Alabama has it wrong here. And it's just funny because, Alabama, their history, etc., and other things. But they're like, no, you can, these parents can sue because their offspring, died uh wrongfully, or at least not, it's not for them to determine whether they were wrongfully killed, just that they have the ability to sue for that. So if you're a little confused what I'm talking about, because all I see are conversations about IVF and the backlash the possible ramifications, and IVF clinics being scared about being able to function because they think this ruling will basically make it too expensive to function or impossible to function. And I went over this yesterday. I did cough a lot because I was sick, but I'm still sick. But um, we'll see. I think I'm fine. We'll hopefully we'll get all through this without some kind of coughing fit. But there is a clinic. There is a clinic in Alabama, and someone who should not have access got in to this area where they were keeping the embryos. They removed the embryos and they ended up dropping them. And so the parents are like, these should be like, they're like basically babysitting their children, their offspring, right? And they are embryos. They're not frozen eggs and frozen sperm. They are, once a sperm, just scientifically here, just this is up for debate. This is like science. It's accurate. Once that sperm fertilizes that egg, boom, you got a new distinct human individual. Not that that individual can live on their own at that point in time. Obviously need a lot of help, especially if they're outside of the womb where they really don't belong. They need a lot of help, but that is a distinct human living being at that point. So they are frozen. Someone comes in, shouldn't be there. They drop the embryos. And so they're like, well, this should have they shouldn't have been able to get in there. There's supposed to be the security, etc. Blah blah blah. So these parents came together. I think there was 3 sets of parents in the case, and so they decided to sue the clinic. And it got up to the Alabama Supreme Court, and they ruled that there is a wrongful death of minors act or something, and they did not have a reason to exclude these embryos, even though that they were outside of the uterus. And so people are very concerned about the ramifications of the case. I was going back and forth with someone who said, "We're done talking now. I'm done engaging with you," and they're like, they shouldn't have ruled this because it impacts too many people. I'm like, so you don't think that the court should have ruled in the favor of these parents? You think they should have ruled in the favor of the corporations? That's another thing. I'm like, parents versus like big medical corporation, parents versus big medical corporation. Like, and people are like, darn it, we're big business right now. Take the side of the big business. And I understand that it has repercussions. That's what happens. You bring something to the court, and it ends up having effect after effect after effect, and you get to like Supreme Court level, on the state level, and eventually you might make it all the way to the federal Supreme, to the actual SCOTUS, and it could have crazy ramifications. Imagine if, like with Roe v. Wade, we were like, oh, they should have never took it to the Supreme Court, and if they were just like, we're not going to rule on it because it's going to impact too many people. Like, in which the court sometimes, it rules very, very narrow, so it has like minimal effect. But that's just how the systems work with the different appeals, and this sets different precedents and stuff. So I understand you're mad. Why are you mad at the courts? Either the courts ruled correctly according to the law, or they did not rule correctly according to the law. That's what the argument should be. I understand people are concerned about the ramifications of IVF and what's going to happen, etc. But either the courts ruled correctly according to the law, or they did not. And if you're really mad at the case coming before the court, be mad at the parents then. Be mad at the parents for even bringing the case. Whether they want, I don't know what kind of damages, for whether they're doing it to be their way to grieve and to mourn, or get attention, or financial gain. I don't know what their end game is. I don't really think the parents are the heroes in the story either, because the clinic was like, well, they're treating them like property. They're not treating them like persons, because after a certain amount of time, like, we can dispose of them, or we can use them for experiments and other things like that. And if that's the case, how are they property? And I think they have a good point, but the courts were just kind of like, there's a lot of ethical things that are here on the table that we could discuss, but we're not going to weigh on all those things. We're going to weigh on the fact that we don't have a reason to disregard them and disqualify these embryos from this particular law. Therefore, yes, they can sue you. They can sue you. Now, after they actually sue the clinic, uh, for this, we'll see what happens, you know? But it's amazing people's outrage to it. And I saw Meghan McCain, she had tweeted out, I know a lot of conservatives who use IVF, and that, like, that was her statement on it. I'm like, what does that have to do with the actual facts of the case? And this is part of the reason why conservatives lose. Because the Democrats will just, they'll attach themselves to this narrative. The narrative will be so whack and so untrue, but it's so passionate to them. So they're just like, oh, they're coming after IVF and a woman's right to have a family, and they're doing all these things, and we told you this would happen post Roe v. Wade world, and all this stuff, and we got to stop the Republicans, and we got to win in the ballot box and make sure we can protect this stuff, and how dare they but the fact of the matter is, these parents, and they wanted these kids. I suppose they're upset that they've been killed. It is a, I don't understand. No one is really telling me that it wasn't a wrongful death when I'm going back and forth with people. They're just wrong about the repercussions of the case. The actual details. Do you think that person who shouldn't have been there should have been able to get access to these embryos and drop them? You think that the organization, the company, should just be able to get off scot free with that, and that the parent should be able to do wrongful death? You really don't think that was a wrongful death? And I understand people don't want to think of them as children. Technically, they're their offspring. A child is a son or daughter of any age. I'm my mother's child. I'm not a child, because what another definition of a child is someone below the age of, like, maturity, and I've reached that mature stage, certainly. So I'm not a child in that sense. But I certainly am my mother's child. So there's a relational aspect. There's like a developmental kind of stage aspect. But if we're just considering, like, below the age of sort of maturity, then you know, how do you not kind of consider that? But even if it was a child, like, are they some kind of persons, or are they some kind of property? And I guess we could debate that. You know where I'm gonna land on that. uh but I don't see how you can't say that, like, the clinic is clearly in the wrong here. Some people are like, oh, well, there's so many things that can happen in the clinic, and they sign waivers. I'm like, there's a waiver for for a random person coming in and messing with stuff that they shouldn't be messing with, and them dropping the embryos. That if people sign waivers like that, maybe it isn't in there. Maybe it's in there, and if it's in there, then I assume they're probably going to lose their wrongful death suit. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to bring it against the clinic. So instead of, conservatives going like, oh my gosh, they're framing this stuff about IVF, and I know so many who's pro IVF, and this is going to push moderates. Why don't you actually talk about the facts of the case? Because if these clinics are so upset and concerned now because they don't know if they're going to be able to um operate if they have this looming over their head, excuse me, that's concerning. That's concerning. But anyway, we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna get to this MSNBC video. Ooh, sorry, excuse me. So let me give me 1 second while I pull this up.
unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalist is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
So, let's just listen one more time. So you understand the madness we're dealing with.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalist is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
So this is really stupid. And I saw someone tweet it and be like, I should be surprised with how stupid these people are at MSNBC, but they do employ Joy Reid. So you should be surprised with how dumb some of these people are. However, this is top tier. If you're commentating on politics and this idea that there are Christians and there are Christian nationalists, and there's a big difference. I'm sure one you're trying to say is fine, and the other ones aren't. Okay, because the Christian nationalists are the ones aligned with Trump here. Okay, and the difference between the two is that the Christian nationalists believe that their rights come from God, not from Congress, not from the state, whatever. That sort of any man on earth authority, they believe it's from a higher power. That's kind of what we're founded on. So it's like all the founding fathers and most people just in general, even if they're not Christian, are they part of this Christian nationalist coalition because they acknowledge that the Declaration of Independence, and I'll just read that section for you guys. I'm sure you probably know it because you're smarter than the people at MSNBC. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of the government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate the government's law established should not be changed, and for light of blah, 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 blah. But anyway, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. All right? So we believe, we were founded on the idea that our rights are not something that's given to us by man. It is something that is transcendent, that we inherently have. So if you're not religious, maybe you just ascribe to the idea that natural rights, we naturally come into this world with particular rights. Now, some people will argue that no, our rights come from man. They're like social contracts that we negotiate. And Matt Walsh pointed this out when he retweeted this clip. He's like, okay, if we're just really going to say that our rights are something that's not given to us by a creator or natural inherent or whatever, it's actually something that we negotiate as a society. Like, we come together and we're like, okay, because we've agreed to it, you actually have the right to free speech now. Because we agree to it, you have the right to worship your God. Because we agree to it, you have the right to not be killed. If our rights are just socially constructed, why are people ticked off when they feel that we take away some kind of right? If the society, like, I can understand, like, emotionally why you like, you're ticked off, you had something and someone takes it away. But if we all come together and we're like, you know what, you really don't have that right there. I mean, we could just, you don't have a right to abortion, and it's definitely not affirmed in the Constitution. But that's something that people considered that they had a right that was given to them because of the Roe v. Wade, and it was in the country for 50 years, and it got overturned. And people were like crying and gnashing with teeth, and having all kind of dramatic breakdowns. If our rights are simply things that we negotiate with each other, and it's not like a human rights thing that we have inherently just kind of uh naturally given to us when we come into this world as human beings. Um, which I guess if you're a pro-choice, I don't know how you could argue that you're stand for human rights when think that you need some kind of extra qualifier besides being human and alive to get them. Um, then if someone takes something away, that's just, well, the society deemed that you didn't actually have that right, and that's uh within the right of the social contract to do that. But that's not how we operate. We believe that there's certain unalienable rights that are transcendent beyond what men can decide. And our Constitution, which I'm sure this is where this woman kind of probably thinks that we get our rights, the Constitution it outlines what the federal government can do, because it's limiting their power. That's why it says, like, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It's like it's laying out stuff. And there's things that are addressed in the Constitution. It's like, okay, well, the state can figure that out, but it's limiting the power of the federal government. That's what the Constitution is doing there. It's not granting me the right to free speech. That's not what it's doing. That's not the purpose of the Constitution. And I already read through this part about the why we institute sorry. Ooh. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So the reason why government exists is to protect these unalienable rights. If we wanted to live without any kind of government, there's a concept like limited government stuff. If we wanted to do whatever we wanted, um, you know, live wherever we wanted, if you don't like someone, take them out, kill them, etc., infringe on other people's kind of God-given rights, and nobody can protect them because there's no form of government. We can live like that. It would probably be, some people would probably argue it would be great. Some people would be like that would be chaos, because if I kill you, where's justice going to be? Maybe other people come and decide revenge, and then more revenge ensues, and more revenge ensues, and you get like your family at war, and then you get like gangs at war, and then you get just bigger groups at war to take some kind of like revenge killings and all kinds of different stuff. And it could just keep expanding into like different chaos, right? So we have a government. So if I did decide to kill you, then we have authorities that could say, no, this person had a right to life. You violated that, and therefore we as a governing authority, we're going to put you through a process. We're going to try you. We're gonna gather the evidence. We're gonna have you be among your peers, and they're gonna judge you. And if you're found guilty, we're going to strip you of some of your rights with after you've had this due process, and then put you away. And we could do that. So you don't have ultimate authority and freedom under a limited government. If you didn't want the government, you could live limitlessly, but perhaps dangerously next to your neighbors who also have the freedom to commit harm against you. But because we believe that I have my rights, and I guess they end where where your nose begins or whatever, and I can't infringe upon you, and then we acknowledge that we need a government to keep that sort of peace there. So the reason why government exists is to protect our inalienable rights, not to, I don't know, be a fire hose of cash for all of our world problems, but they're supposed to exist to protect our unalienable rights. So if you are really believing that the Constitution grants our rights, or that Nancy Pelosi can whip up something and grant our rights, that's not accurate, and that's not how our country is founded. So it's just a historical ignorance. People are blasting this lady, talking about how these people, they're basically bragging that I don't read, I don't know anything, and I'm so confident about it. Like that's what it is with these people on these programs. You know, Happy Friday. Looking at the comments. Um, yeah, it's so when I saw that clip, I woke up this morning and you guys can still hear it in my voice and stuff. And I already like coughed a bit, so you guys know I'm still sick. When I woke up, it was like so awful, and um, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna do anything today. And then I saw this clip, and I'm like, I have to talk about it. It just gave me life. It gave me life how awful this was. Um, and I just had to talk about it, and because it's so bizarre, and not just because of the ignorance of the statement and not understanding how our government works, but again, she made this difference between Christian and Christian nationalists, and she said like there's a big difference, guys. Like one is good and the other is not good. So the ones who are fine and good and dandy are the ones who do not believe in what the Declaration of Independence say, right? The Christians are the ones who are like, yes, big government, yes, big government, yes, give me my rights, yes. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. Those are the good ones. The ones who have picked up a history book, you know, or they're the ones who are the ones to watch out for. And this just kind of speaks to like a deeper problem with the left. There are some Christian people who are way too into Trump. I saw one thing that was like, how much do you trust your pastor? And then they asked the question like, how much do you trust Trump? And the numbers from that particular poll, people like trusted Trump more than their pastor. And I'm like, one, these people need to find better churches. Two, these people have a high of opinion of Trump. I don't care how much you like him. It concerned me a little bit. I'm like, people say all the time that MAGA is a cult. I'm like, well, some of them are in a cult. Someone is in a cult. I'm not in a cult, but somebody's in a cult. If these numbers, aren't have any bearing on reality. So yeah, there's some people who are, kind of weird and naive about their opinions and stuff, but they really stretch out Christian nationalists a lot, a lot. One article a couple years back when they were really talking about this term Christian nationalism, basically, if you had any kind of right leaning or even seemed kind of moderate position that was like common sense, they kind of labeled it under the Christian nationalist position. I can't remember if it was a Rolling Stone or a Newsweek article or something. I thought about like doing a put a finger down video on like TikTok and just listing a couple of different points. And if you got to the end and your fingers were up, I'm like, congratulations, you're a Christian nationalist, which I'm sure many atheists would have fallen under that category. It's just really a catch-all boogeyman for a lot of people. Um, because you don't have to be a Christian to acknowledge that we have natural rights or inherent rights that aren't given to us by our governing authorities. And again, that's just how our country is. But the reason why they're okay with this idea of the Christians who don't think that way, who are just kind of very ignorant of history, um, is because those are the people who they see who are not going to live out their convictions and spill it over into the ballot box. They're okay with that. They're so okay with like woke black churches. They're fine with that. So many black churches, not my black church, but so many black churches are so woke, and or maybe they're not super woke, but they'll still have, maybe they're not woke at all. Maybe they're totally conservative, but they will still vote Democrat without any sort of deep thought about it. They're just stuck in that mode. And then they'll have Cory Bush and not Cory Bush. I meant Cory Booker and I don't know, Cory Bush might go to some of these places, but Cory Booker and all these other Democrats who vote for things they do not agree with, things they do not like. But they'll have them come in their church. They'll say a couple of things that make it go, oh, ooh, like react to the crowd, give them a little revved up, and then they'll go and they'll just, vote straight party Democrat. And they're the people who go to church more than any other like minority, pretty much. But they're just stuck voting Democrat, so they don't come out and trash black churches too much for being too religious or being too political, because they vote the way that they want them to vote. But I wrote an article. Oh gosh, I don't know the title, but it has a lot of these details in it. But like, when it comes to like kind of more white evangelical churches, the more that people go to church, the more likely they are to vote Republican. And I assume because they're kind of more into their convictions, their biblical convictions. And so it bleeds out into the ballot box. So if you're going to church a lot, you're like, yeah, it's wrong to kill babies. You don't have to be a Christian to believe that. But if that's on a ballot, you're probably going to be like, oh, yeah, let's just allow that to happen. Probably not, So, but if you're gonna vote a different kind of way than how the Democrats want you to vote, of course they don't like you. Of course they don't like you. They're not. Unfortunately, they're not too afraid of the black church. Again, because they just basically vote down tick straight party ticket Democrat. But those evangelical churches, those white evangelical churches and stuff, they're more likely to vote conservative, vote Republican, and therefore they are bad and they need to be talked about. They don't like them too much. And when they're political, it's bad. It's not bad when the Democrats show up in the black churches. It's bad when Trump or somebody shows up in the white church. That's bad. Or it was bad when when Trump showed up in the black churches in Detroit. People were mad about that. People were mad about that, and then people were like, still after that time Trump came, we're still going to what church did he go to? I can't remember. It was a big church in Detroit. I can't remember what church he went to. It's a big name too, but it just escapes me right now. But people were going and protesting and acting up in the churches after that, and because people did that, people didn't want to really, they were apprehensive about really having him back and stuff that way, because they didn't want people to come in those churches and act a fool. Because these people decided they couldn't respect the house of God because politics. Someone said Fonnie Willis does need some church. LOL. And Fonnie Willis is another one. She'll come to these churches, and she'll, start saying stuff about racism. They're coming against me, etc. Blah blah blah. She'll just sit up and she'll lie to these people. Joe Biden will go to these churches and lie and say things like, "I was a part of the civil rights movement," etc. Blah blah blah. Just lie to their faces, and they still wouldn't. They voted for this man. So they don't mind taking advantage of the black church, because they just vote straight party Democrat. So they don't mind the politics. I think this was during the midterms. I showed some clips of some churches talking about Warnock, and they were going to support Warnock in Georgia, and they were talking trash about Herschel Walker, which Herschel Walker is not a good candidate. Trump totally blew that up. He should have never wanted to push him, and there were all kinds of problems with Herschel Walker, and a lot of people didn't want to vote for what they felt like was a deadbeat dad. Would he have been worse than Warnock? I guess not, but if you can't get your side excited about a person, you can't get your side excited about a person. But these preachers, in one clip they talked about things that were very conservative, like traditional kind of conservative values. They were complaining about abortion. They were complaining about like homosexuality and other stuff like that. And then like immediately they flipped and they started talking trash about like Herschel Walker, and they started uplifting Warnock. And I'm like, Warnock is going to vote against the things that you support. And they're complaining about the government pushing things on them that they didn't want. So it was really mind boggling. It's like it's not mind boggling. It's just because I understand they're just stuck in this pattern of voting the same way, and not really analyzing. Like they can't let go. So because they don't move their convictions to the ballot box and analyze person by person. Now, if people were really informed, maybe they pick better people in the primaries against their own Democrats. But a lot of the Democrats just, they're all pretty. So many of them are very extreme. So they won't allow themselves to cross over and support someone who is a Republican because they're just so programmed against it. Even if the Democrats are going to push things that they vehemently disagree with. So the Democrats will use the black church. They will not talk about how political, and they can, black churches can be so political. There's a page that I follow called Woke Preacher Clips on Twitter, and they post stuff all the time. And you'll see stuff from white churches, sure, but you'll definitely see things from black churches. And black church can be so political, I promise you. My mom had recorded this documentary about the gospel music, and we were watching it on Wednesday night, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I was kind of doing some other things, so I watched a bit of it. But toward the end, it was interesting. There's things to complain about, I guess, but uh toward the end of it, they really focused quite a bit of time toward the end on this church that seemed kind of woke, like during the lockdown. And I'm like, why are they spending all this time talking about this woke church and let's talk about racial social justice stuff, as opposed to, I don't know, spending some more time on Fred Hammond or something? Because when it was over, I'm just like, they didn't talk about Fred Hammond. And my sister's like, they didn't talk about commission. And those are, if you know gospel music, those are some big names. And they talked about some really big names and spent some big, a lot of time on like Mahalia Jackson, who actually, helped Martin Luther King a lot. And they spent some time on a little bit of time on Yolanda. I thought they should spend more time on Yolanda, but Shirley Caesar and other greats, for sure. And but they, once they start getting to the present, or closer to the present, like they showed a bunch of CDs and we're like, oh my gosh, we had covers for all those CDs. And Fred Hammond was on one of the CDs there. I'm sorry, that was my dad, who should know that I'm recording right now, but what can you do? Sorry, I didn't have my phone out. But it just kind of baffled me. I'm like, why they spend this much time here on this thing? It just, because it just kind of seemed like there was a big skip all of a sudden, and then they focused on that. Or if they were to focus on pandemic stuff, there was a lot of like Christian or gospel artists who were doing different concerts during the pandemic, as a way to still, bring people together, to still encourage people. Like I know Fred Hammond did something with like a online concert and stuff like that. So they wanted to talk about how people were utilizing, because they talked about how gospel kept evolving. So they wanted to talk about how people were utilizing social media and other things like that. They could have done that and still focused on the artist, but they were focused on this church, and they're like, they had a praise team that they showed a little bit of, and they were okay. They weren't that great, but not enough to focus on the time on them while they were talking about a gospel documentary. It just was, but it was just strange to me. But I'm sure they wanted to put in that particular message, because at certain times they were focusing on like the politics and stuff. So anyway, black churches can be very, very political, but you do not hear the left talk about that Christian nationalism, because they're not a threat to them. They're not a threat to their agendas. Now, if they are a threat to their agendas, there was some time ago, and I don't know if this really would have impacted black churches, but there was a ordinance that got shot down, and it's some city dealing with with gay marriage or something, and they wanted to see the sermons of the pastors. This was some years ago, and people were not okay with that because they wanted to know how they were the people were being influenced by the churches on the subject. If they think that you can hinder them, they are going to try to stop you. So if the black church started to switch up things and they said, you know what, we can't vote for these people because they're not they're implementing some things and pushing some stuff on us that we certainly do not like. We don't want this for our children, etc. They would want to muzzle the churches like they did it back in the past, like the Johnson Amendment and so on. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Their issue with the Christian nationalists, the white nationalists, or whatever the Christian nationalists will say, they'll be upset about is really because they will oppose their agenda. And I saw a post today that I replied to, and I retweeted on Twitter. And it just seemed like there's someone named Reverend Benjamin Creamer. He's some pastor, BA in religion, MA in spiritual foundation, theological studies, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Idaho. But he said, I am a Christian. I believe in the separation of church and state. I believe in democracy. I believe people should be free to live according to their own beliefs. My faith compels me to pursue the common good for all, not control. There are many of us out there. So I hate kind of like, please like me, please. That weak-willed Christians appear to do for the world. So I retweeted that, and I'm like, okay, I also believe in the separation of church and state, but I believe in the separation of church and state that's outlined by Jefferson when he addressed the Danbury Baptist Association. And so some people foolishly believe that the declaration that the separation of church and state is something in the Constitution that is the points of the churches to be like, you can't get too close to the government now, like back away. Like that's not what the separation of church and state is. The Danbury Baptist Association, like they were concerned even by the Constitution listing anything about the freedom of religion in there, because they thought that was the implication, was that the government was giving them that right, and they didn't want that to be the case. They didn't believe that to be the case. So Jefferson replied to them and was like, no, that's not what that's about. There's a wall of separation here between like us and the government. But people were concerned about the role of the government with these different denominations and stuff, because in England they had clear favorites with different denominations, and they didn't want to really bring that in, from like top down government ruling on these different sects of faith and stuff. And they're like, no, that's not really our role here. But people's idea of sorry, I got distracted. People's idea of the separation of church and state, it's just that when people mention it, it's like I don't think everyone I see complains about it doesn't seem to know what it is or where it's from. And I don't know if this person knows where it's from, but I don't see the point of bringing it up in these kind of conversations if you know where it's from. But here's the thing though, if you are a Christian, and he claims to be a Christian, it's reverend in his bio, and he's talking about like he believes in fighting for the common. My faith compels me to pursue the common good for all, not control. Okay, well the common good. Why are you Christian if you don't believe that your beliefs are the common good? If you don't believe that God kind of sets that morality, and that if people were obedient to those sort of moral convictions, that if you don't believe that would lead to a better world, why are you Christian? And you have to control, but if you don't debate for and for your convictions, the secularists will, but not believing that if you believe that people shouldn't be murdered, that's a biblical commandment, like thou shalt not murder. So that's a moral conviction that most people share. And that's also something that's backed up by your biblical worldview. And you don't have to be a Christian to agree with that. Um, you know, I guess Frank Turk and other people would come out and say, like, if you're an atheist, though, you can't justify objective morality, though, which I would agree with. But we come to this conclusion that yes, we have an inherent right to life, an inalienable right, and it should be protected. But that also stems from this moral conviction of, hey, you should not be able to commit murder against someone. God gives us, our Creator gives us life, and you don't willy-nilly have the power to just take it, especially without some kind of removal by due process, without some kind of due process, which would allow you to remove my rights or something. Maybe if it's like capital punishment or something like that. So, that's a moral conviction. When a pro-choice person argues, like someone today said, pointing a picture when I was talking about the embryo situation in Alabama, and they showed a picture of like the embryos that would be in the petri dishes or something. And like, this doesn't have a brain, and this doesn't have a heart, so this isn't a person. And I said, well, I understand that's your belief, right? That is your belief. That's not really what defines a person in the sense that we're talking about all this stuff. You're not going to find a definition of a person like someone who has a heart and a brain. Like, I understand you're talking about the philosophical concept of personhood, which is a philosophical concept that we debate. A person, in the technical definition, is a human being individual. So are they human? Are they an individual as in like a distinct human being? Yes. Yes, they are. So on a self-determined path of development, unless you freeze it or something like that, then you've stunted its development through like a scientific means or whatever. But yeah, that's I understand you don't believe it's a person, but can we agree that it is human and alive, right? Human and alive. It is technically. So what can you do? I understand you don't want it to be a person. And then when people say stuff like, well, it's not really a person until it exits the vajayjay, that's quite a belief. I don't know how you validate that belief, because I can name examples how you're going to be inconsistent, but that's a belief. So if someone was to argue that belief, if you're a Christian, are you to be like, well, I can't argue otherwise because I don't want to control people? They're arguing that someone they should be protected from violence, and you're too much of a chump to say no, we should love justice and mercy. So I don't know. I don't like stuff like that. I don't like stuff like that at all. So anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about this situation with Allie Stucky. So Allie Stucky, she had an interview. Well, was on a panel recently, and the subject of trad wives came up, and if you don't know trad wives, there's like a trend where you'll have the wives online who are like in the 50s, cute little dresses or something like that. They don't have to necessarily be in the 50s, but they're baking the pies and they're getting their homes and stuff all together, etc. Blah blah blah. And it's fine if you want to live your life like that. But she just noted that just because you do that, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are living out some kind of biblical worldview, and that your wife is actually like a biblical sort of wife because she's doing all these kind of old fashioned sort of things. So I just want to play her clip.
The trend of being a trad wife or having a trad life on social media, which is really less about traditional or biblical values and a lot more about aesthetics. And obviously there's nothing wrong with living on a farm and making your own sourdough and homesteading and all of those wonderful things. But because this has become a trend on TikTok and a trend on social media, unfortunately, some people have made the mistake of conflating that so-called trad life and being a trad wife with being a biblical wife or a biblical mom or having a biblical life. While homesteading and all of that is wonderful, it's great. Motherhood for the Christian is obviously much more than a social media trend. It's not just something that you cosplay, put a costume on and play and pretend. It's not just an aesthetic, it is a calling by God. And there are biblical standards, of course, that women are called to, but it is they're not standards that are set by social media. They're not standards that are set by a TikTok trend. They're not standards set by whatever social media influencer you follow that says, in order to be a good mom, you have to make your own sourdough. That's a wonderful thing, but you can be a great and biblical wife and mom without doing some of those things, which is good news for me because I like to buy my sourdough.
So I thought that was fine, and some people online were upset about it. So let me run through a couple of these comments I was looking at. Oh, the feminist doesn't like the traditional womanhood. Color me shocked, which Allie is not a feminist. Oh, imagine that. One of the top voices in conservative Christian female political commentary space doesn't think that the traditional household slash homemaking resurgence is biblically based. Who could have seen this coming? I don't even know what that means or how you get to that conclusion. So, and there's someone who's standing up for her and points out that a lot of these people and these trends are social media influencers. She said many of the objections in responses to this are silly. Someone said, any way you slice it, she's a career woman. There is a distinct difference between her lifestyle and every biblical woman I've ever known. She should be honoring them and not feeling threatened by them for making their own sourdough. She said it's fine to make your own sourdough. And Allie's not threatened, but a trad wife is a wife that lives out the Bible. And I don't know if that's all accurate as far as like some of these people participating in the trend. The triggering is incredible. Peeps really can't handle their idols and sources of pride being exposed. Love you guys usually, but many traditional wives are alone and unsupported outside their small church circle, sometimes not even there. Every woman older than 60 in my conservative Baptist church worked full-time during child raising, except one. For example, the social media community grew out of that and is still only a place to get encouragement, inspiration, tips, hints, etc. Yes, I must have missed the part where the Bible says that the woman should be the head of the household. I'll go reread it. Anyway, people are saying she's correct. Sorry, I don't get my theology from a woman. Anyway, just because you do consider yourself kind of part of the trad wife trend, I think she's correct that it doesn't necessarily mean that you are part of like the biblical sort of woman. Just because you are at home and you're taking care of, I don't know, you're dressed up all pretty and you're taking care of your man and baking the bread and everything from scratch or whatever, especially these people who are doing it for clicks and whatnot. I don't know. But I appreciate and respect stay-at-home mothers and people who are really taking care of the household, as the father may go out and bring home the bacon and stuff, but they're handling the business of the family. and keeping the kids in line, and keeping helping with their schooling or getting them to school, and keeping the house in order, and issuing support in all kinds of ways. My mom, she never worked, and she is invaluable to my father, absolutely invaluable to the family, and so she hates to cook though, but she's a good cook. Excuse me. Oh, I got a cough. Give me 1 second. I tried to hold it in, guys. I did. So anyway, I wanted to go through a pretty famous passage, Proverbs 31. This I'm reading from the ESV version. Uh, Starting in the 10th verse, an excellent wife who can find. She's far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships uh, of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household, and she portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. So there is a lot of work already going in. She's a support to her husband. She's uh, emotionally a support to her husband. She's someone that the husband can trust in, have pride in, who takes care of her family, who prepares the food and all those things. And whether you're baking the bread or buying it or whatever, I don't think it matters too much. But if you can learn how to make some good bread, that's great. But also that she considers a field as she buys it. So there's like some entrepreneur kind of aspects where she's in the business of really taking care of her family, and she's you know, not just a person kind of, I don't know, buying like little hats and other things like that to make herself look. She's involved in the business of the family. Here she considers the field and she buys it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamps does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the staff and her hands to the spindle. She opens her hands to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. So she's a charitable person. She's not afraid of stove or her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates. When he sits among the elders of the land, she makes linen garments and sells them. There's more like going out there doing work, which by the way, a lot of like jobs and stuff that before like the really industrialized age really kicked off and stuff, a lot of women were doing like entrepreneurial things within the home. So that really created a different dynamic for women who could like have a little business, but maybe they're hemming pants and they're sewing dresses and other stuff, you know. But once that kind of was mass marketed, mass took off with different big industries popping off, that became less of a thing that women could get their monies together and kind of do. Um, but it's not so absurd for women to have their own business going for the family in the interest of taking care of the family. So she makes the linen garments and sells them, and she delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing. Too many women don't have strength and dignity. Too many of women out here are not bought. um, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. This is someone that she raises a good family. She's well respected. Her husband's respected. People respect that her, and her children respect her and feel that she's blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. Now a lot of these social media folks, beauty, they're not into the beauty is vain part. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. So that is a pretty famous passage encompassing, you know, a good woman and all the things that she can have her hands in. So it's not like just the person who's, cleaning the house and making pies in fancy dresses waiting for her husband to come home so he can stare at her, while he eats his meatloaf or whatever. Um, it's someone who's kind of a Renaissance woman who does all things. Families, especially like in the near ancient East, was really a business. Like who you would marry and your families joining together, and uh, all of it was really a business. And even the hierarchies of the family, like the woman would submit to the man, but the man is also like probably submitting to like a higher figure in the family who's another male figure. So everyone kind of served their purpose, within the family to bolster it and lift it up and to make it grow and be more successful. So you know, for the trad wives or the just if you're just consider yourself a stay home mom, stay at home mom, but not so much a trad wife, like your work is important, but just because you do those things doesn't mean that you are living a biblical worldview if you're not instilling those biblical values within your children, and if you don't still take the other things like uh speaking with the kindness and doing the charitable things and other things like that. So it's not just looking pretty and making bread. Uh so I don't think what Allie said was wrong, and I don't see why it's triggering so many people. She's just saying it's more to it than just being someone who submits under the man. I would say, you know, that just because you have that dynamic doesn't mean that particular relationship isn't what makes it godly or biblical. So I just wanted to throw that out there and have that extra tidbit there in your minds. Yeah, my sister said, people just hear what they want to hear. She didn't say anything wrong. I agree. I agree. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Um, you go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation. blacktnews.com/donate. It does cost a stream, run my website, all that stuff. So if you guys can do that, I appreciate you. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can still send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, at this point, you can do super thanks, and I appreciate you. Check out different merch that we have available at the store, like different mugs and t-shirts and so on. And you guys can also go to Amazon or check out some of my books. Again, I have 17 altogether, but you guys don't have to go to Amazon. Well, you'll eventually have to go to Amazon to pick it up, but you guys can just go to blacktnews.com and go to the merchandise page, and there's a banner that'll take you to my book website where you can learn more about what I have going on there. So thank you guys. I am going to be taking at least a couple days next week off. So definitely Monday and Tuesday off. And hopefully by the time you hear me, I'll, I won't, my throat is a little sore. It hurts a little bit to swallow. And uh, I didn't think my throat was this irritated, but I guess it's just from the talking so much. But yeah, hopefully everything will be, it's not like, I was really congested this morning. I took some, uh gosh, Mucinex or something. So I'm glad I got through today. I guess it was better than yesterday, but hopefully I'll be fine and I will not be infected by a little lovable child who I dearly love. My nieces and my nephews, but man, they got some germs, as all kids do. But God bless you guys, and I'll see you next week.